two players, two sides. One is light, one is dark. Whoa. Do you want to know a secret?
Welcome back to the evolution of horror, and welcome to part 2 of our Lost retrospective. We dropped part 1 a couple of days ago, in which Jacob Stolworthy and I discussed seasons 1 to 3 of Lost in depth. What I'm dropping today is the Patreon episode in which Jacob Stolworthy and I discuss seasons 4, 5 and 6, and that somewhat controversial and divisive ending of Lost as well. We'll also talk a little bit about the aftermath of Lost and some of the revelations, some of the allegations that have come out since the show finished, especially stuff that's been revealed over the last few years. So there's lots to get into this week. Please enjoy the concluding half of my spoilerific discussion of Lost. Okay, so Jacob, season 4. We had that incredible season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass. We got our first flash forward. This was the first time that the show actually told its audience, this is heading towards an endpoint. People do get off the island, right? So we've got this momentum now, 3 seasons to go. Audiences knew that Lost was going to run for 3 more seasons, and they were going to be shorter seasons, right? You mentioned already, Lost season 4 happened during the writer's strike, right? And it is absolutely one of the few shows on television that sort of benefited from the writer's strike, right? Because it had a much, much shorter episode count than usual. And I think that actually gave it real momentum, didn't it? So how would we describe season 4, Jacob? It's basically the story of how our survivors actually get off the island, right?
Yeah, I mean, because they're off the island, and then slowly it's kind of revealed that there's 6 of them that left the island. So then you've suddenly like, well, which 6? In flash forwards, and they replay around a bit. In some episodes, you think you're watching flashbacks, but it's actually the future, and vice versa. And there's real fun to be had. But yeah, season 4 is very much about the time matching up to the point where these people left the island, and basically the horror they went through to get there, because it's not plain sailing.
No.
It's anything but. it's
Yeah.
So, what do you do for a living, my friend?
I do nothing.
Nothing. Doesn't pay for relocation here.
I was the recipient of a large settlement.
Corporate merger?
Actually, a plane crash. Oceanic Airlines Flight 815. I'm Syed Jarrah, one of the Oceanic 6.
Yeah, I guess the central mystery of season 4 is who gets off the island and how, right? And we learn in the opening of season 4 that there is a group called the Oceanic 6. So there are only 6 people officially that get off the island to safety. And that we soon learn, episode by episode, with flash forward by flash forward, that it's Jack and Kate, it's Saeed, it's Hurley, son, right? But not Jin, and it's baby Aaron. So that is all going on in the future, revealing the Oceanic 6. And then, of course, yeah, like you said, we've got this kind of quite kind of dramatic series of events that happen in the present day, where a freighter arrives just offshore to rescue our survivors, but not all of them are there with good intentions. And this is where we meet a whole group of new characters, really great new characters, actually, you know, compared to some of the new characters that we said got introduced in season 2 and season 3 who didn't quite work, like Ana Lucia and Libby and Nikki and Paolo, etc. These characters, you know, Miles, Kimi, Daniel Faraday, these characters are like firm fan favourites.
Hey there. Are you Jack? Yeah, I'm Jack. Who are you? I'm Daniel Faraday. I'm here to rescue you.
It's funny because, Lost, has such good track record of just introducing characters later on that just stand up with the best of them. And Miles, weirdly, is the one I least liked at first, who I end up loving the most, which is just again like he's very abrasive at first, and then the walls come down. So I love that they're just not skimping on the characterization at this point in the show. They're really taking time to make these characters human. But Faraday is very important because he obviously is a physicist, and he's kind of our introduction. Well, I guess we have Desmond, but he's very much linked with Desmond because he can kind of inform him on a lot of the time stuff that he's been experiencing. Yes. Season 4's got that amazing. I just love it, and I think you do as well. Like the time travel element, but like when it's like really hinted at in really eerie ways. Like there's that scene where they're speaking to the boat, and the doctor is like, there's a whole thing where the doctor's body washes up on shore, but he's alive on the boat because he hasn't been killed yet, because there's a time difference between. So when
they're in like some weird little pocket of time almost on this freighter, right? Oh, it's so
it's really eerie. The doctor's like, they're Morse code. He's like, they say that your body's washed up on shore, and he's like, what? But I'm alive, and you just know then he's going to get killed, and you're going to see it. And it's just little things like that.
It's so clever because in some ways this show has dealt with time from the beginning. Like its whole flashback structure is that it does this jumping around in time thing. And then that actually gets woven into the text by season 4, right? Where we are now literally jumping around in time or messing with time. And I'm such a sucker for anything time travel related. I'm always like, yeah, come on. And when we get this incredible Desmond episode, The Constant, like you said, which is one of the fan favourite episodes of all time, where you've got this character of Desmond, who, again, an amazing vessel for the writers, right? But it's like he is aware of his own flashbacks, right? It's like his consciousness is able to jump back and forth in time. And this episode, called The Constant, generally considered and voted for as the greatest ever episode of Lost. It's about halfway into season 4, and it is Desmond basically making outside contact with Penny, his long-lost love, via this amazing, really complex time travel adventure that he goes on with Daniel Faraday from the past helping him, and it's wonderful.
It's just structurally super inventive, first and foremost. Like, and it's done in a way that doesn't alienate people who aren't a fan of time travel, because it's like you say, it's his consciousness traveling. So he's staying where he is, but his mind is going back to 1996 or whatever. And it's essentially, at its height, is a love story as well, because he ends up having to anchor himself to both times, otherwise he'll have a brain aneurysm and die. So then you've got this danger element, but he has to, the person who can anchor him is his long-lost love, Penelope Whitmore, who we find out season 2 has been looking for him. So he's on this hunt to find her, a race against time, really. But you really are desperate because he's been talking about Penny for so long, and you really want them to reunite. As an audience, you really, really are craving seeing them together or interacting or whatever. So you've got that anticipation as well. There's so much going on. There's so many spinning plates. And Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. Absolutely. This is Damon Lindelof, oh my God, incarnate, this episode, isn't it? Like,
yes,
what he's gone on to do, you're just like, well, of course he wrote The Constant. Like, that is such a Lindelof-y episode.
I'm so sorry. I love you.
I love you too.
I don't know where I am, but
I'll find you, Des.
I promise.
No matter what.
I'll come back to you.
I won't give up.
I promise.
I promise. I love you.
But yeah, just to throw it in like episode 5, and I think people were just like, wow, this is like a standalone classic episode of TV, for like structurally and formally and, you know, in every other way.
It's perfect. And season 4 is so great because it's this, like, we know they're getting off the island, we know it's coming, but it's all about how it happens, right? And we slowly watching it get executed, and it all culminates in a 3-part finale, right? There's no place like home, where we've got this insane series of events happening, where you've got the survivors that get off the island, which is, so who is it? The Oceanic Six. So it's Sun, Jack, Kate, Saeed, Hurley, and baby Aaron,
yeah,
right?
Correct, yeah.
They manage to get off. There's this heartbreaking moment when Jin doesn't make it onto the Chopper, right? So he gets left behind, seemingly dies in an explosion.
And Bob explodes, yeah.
Oh my god. And then you've got poor Sawyer who has to give up his seat on the chopper and jump off, right, to save the others. Like it's great. It's really emotional stuff, isn't it? I think, you know?
Yeah. And then meanwhile you've got the emotional stuff, which is so good. I mean, this is probably my joint favourite finale, actually. You've got that, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you have Locke and Ben in a and Hap specialising in time travel, and Ben pushes a giant frozen donkey wheel, and the island moves. It just literally disappears.
This is what I love. This is what I love to tell people about people that drop off of Lost early. They're like, so what did end up happening in the later seasons? And I always say this moment, I'm like, well, they discover that they can move the island by traveling down into this trapdoor, pushing a giant donkey wheel and moving the island's location. It's like, what the fuck?
It's so good. One of my favourite moments is when that light comes up and the choppers fly back to the island because it's running out of oil and they need to land. And then it goes, bloop, and you see the big giant ripple where the island was. And Frank Lapidus, the great pilot, goes, where's the island? It's just like, what? Where's it? What? So good.
So good.
Yeah.
It's a really brilliant finale because you get this lovely emotional sense of closure where you actually see 6 of them getting off the island and getting rescued.
Wow.
But then you've got the mystery of what the fuck has happened to everyone that's left behind. Sawyer, Juliet, Locke, Jack, Locke, Ben, all these people. Where's the island gone? And then you've got the flash forwards where you've got beardy, depressed Jack saying we have to all go back. And it's revealed, and this has been teased throughout since the season 3 finale, flash forward, right? That he has been talking or stood around this coffin, and we don't know who's in it. And we are left with the reveal at the end of season 4 that it's John Locke. That at some point in the future, John Locke is dead and off the island and in a coffin, right? So you're just like, what the hell?
And his death has spiraled Jack's like breakdown, and like, you know. And like Jack's like, Locke was right. We should never have left. And you're like, wow, like what is it that caused him to flip like this? Yeah. And I think it's that, you know, like seeing them leave the island it's a wonderful sequence, and you're like, it's really moving, and it's a scene that you never thought you'd see in Lost happening in front of your very eyes. But then, you know, at the end when Jack's like, hold on, like we're gonna have to lie about practically everything that happened here, you know, and it's that lie that you learned, it ate at him and made him feel guilty, and it's the 4 people he left behind. But that's such a, you know, you think they leave the island and it will all be happy families and they'll all be happy, but no, it's actually the opposite of that, and it eats away at them.
It does. And yeah, we get that brilliant ending teasing season 5, which is, you know, Ben and Jack, they're stood around Locke's coffin, right? And Ben is like, if you want to go back to the island, Jack, you need to gather everyone. We're all going back together. And this is kind of where it leaves us after season 4, teasing what will be season 5, the return to the island.
Why are you here?
I'm here to tell you that the island won't let you come alone. All of you have to go back.
Are you... Saeed, I don't even know where Saeed is. Hurley is insane. Son blames me for... And Kate... She won't even talk to me anymore.
Perhaps I can help you with that. This is the way it has to be, Jack. It's the only way. You have to do it together, all of you.
How?
I have a few ideas.
So that is season 4, a rip-roaring kind of escape adventure, right? It's a short and sweet season, and then we move on 1 year later to season 5, which is, for my money, Jacob, it's my favourite season of Lost. it is when the show is at its absolute peak. I think that what they do here with this season is so unbelievably clever. This is when the show has fully become a kind of sci-fi time travel adventure show, right? So in the 2007 timeline, you've got the Oceanic Six working on a way to get back to the island, and they have to get this specific flight. They have to kind of replicate all of the conditions of how they crashed the first time. That's all really fun. But what the most fun stuff is what happened to the people that got left behind, right? Sawyer, Juliet, Locke, etc. And what happens is, after the donkey wheel got turned, the island kind of spun off its axis in time, and it starts jumping around in time. So the first few episodes, they're kind of our main characters are kind of jumping all over the place, and we are kind of snatching little bits of the island's history, the island's past and future, trying to piece it together as our characters are suffering. They're kind of experiencing all these major headaches and other things as time is kind of jumping around. Finally, they stop traveling through time and they end up stuck in the 1970s. And there is a whole chunk of this season where Sawyer, etc., all of the people left behind, live and work on the island as part of the Dharma Initiative. And it introduces this whole sort of time loop kind of wraparound storyline, I suppose, whereby these guys were always on the island in the 1970s. These guys were part of that Dharma Initiative that our characters heard about in the first 3 seasons, and it does this brilliantly clever stuff, and it kind of explains to us that whatever happened, right? So this was always going to be the case. This always happened to them. Then our Oceanic Six arrive on the island, and things start getting really messed up from there. But it's I think this season is absolutely spectacular. Jacob, what do you think of season 5?
Fantastic. And each time I watch it, I love it even more. I think the execution of it is amazing. I mean, it's staggeringly complex and yet extremely, like, it's not polarizing at all. And I think that's something that Lost actually doesn't get enough credit for, is that its presentation of time travel, which can be very knotty, as we all know, is actually presented in a very, very understandable manner. But always exciting. I think season 5 is pretty astonishing.
It's so good. You're right. They do it in this very neat way where they basically emphasize whatever happened, right? That's their line that they repeat throughout a lot of the season, which is this idea that anything that happens with these characters going back in time was always going to happen. They're not going to be able to change the outcome of what happened, right? Like, this is always their plot. Yeah, because there's an amazing moment, isn't there? Like, there's a whole kind of plot involving Saeed going back to the 70s and shooting Ben when he's a little boy. Because it's like the theory about shooting Hitler, right? When he's a baby. Is he ultimately going to save all of their lives by killing evil Ben when he's a little boy? But that's not the case. If Ben was shot back in the 70s, he was always shot by Saeed back in the 70s. And this gets explained to our audience surrogate, Hurley, in a brilliant little scene.
What the hell are you doing, Tubby?
Checking to see if I'm disappearing.
What?
Back to the future, man. We came back in time to the island and changed stuff. So if little Ben dies, he'll never grow up to be Big Ben, who's the one who made us come back here in the first place. Which means we can't be here, and therefore, dude, we don't exist.
You're an idiot.
Am I?
Yeah. It doesn't work like that. You can't change anything. Your maniac Iraqi buddy shot Linus. That is what always happened. It's just, we never experienced how it all turns out.
It was really confusing.
Yeah, well, get used to it.
So there are moments, right, where it's almost like the writers talking to their audience a little bit kind of thing. And, it's really smart in that regard. The sci-fi stuff is excellent. But as ever, with the best of Lost, there is an emotional heart to this season too, right? Because these characters that got stuck in the 70s, they stay there for 3 years. And so we experience a kind of time jump. When we return to our characters, Jin now speaks fluent English because he's been living in this community for 3 years. Sawyer has had a complete transformation. He now goes by the name LaFleur, and he is one of the bosses on the island, and he is in, maybe this is the best romance in the whole of Lost, Jacob. Juliet and Sawyer, aka LaFleur, and their lovely little romance, their lovely little life together on the island.
It's so well done, and it makes so much sense, even though you never thought about it beforehand. I think that's why it's considered one of the best love stories, is because it was so unexpected, but it just really, when it clicks, you know. And they are so well suited, and I love that aspect of the show.
Oh, it's so good. But okay, so Jacob, I have some questions for you. As a man that has seen Lost a lot of times, I do have some time travel and mythology related questions about season 5. When our Oceanic 6 crash land back on the island again, most of them go back to the 70s, but some of them stay in the present day. So Locke, Ben, and Sun stay in 2007 on the island. Do we ever find out why that is? Why our characters get sort of split apart in time?
Look, Mike, I just think time travel's unpredictable, right? Hey, who are we to argue with the rules of time travel? No, I think it doesn't really ever get specifically answered why that happens. Interestingly. But like, it's a weird one though, isn't it? Because I've never really questioned it. I'm just kind of like, oh well, you know, that's
what happens.
That's what happened there. Yeah, it's weird, but maybe that's me kind of being forgiving of some of Lost's inability to answer. It answers a lot of questions, but
no, I mean, like, I think it doesn't affect the enjoyment of season 5, I think. And I love that, again, the flashback structure is replaced by this. We flash back between 1977 and 2007, basically, at the two timelines of people on the island, don't we, really? So we've got, like, Locke, who actually turns out not to be Locke, with Ben and Sun and a few new characters in the present day, and then we've got all the Dharma lot in the 70s, and the way in which these timelines kind of coexist together in season 5 is really fun, I think.
Totally, it's like two different shows, and the, you know, the adventure kind of show with because there's even bits like, you know, the temple, and it feels like quite Indiana Jonesy, and they're like swimming underneath like places to get to like hidden trapdoors and has. But then on the flip side, in the present day, it's very. I can see why you like this. It's very horror oriented, and eerie, and like there's that sequence where they go to like certain places on the island, and it just is decrepit, but has like a really uncomfortable feel. Like the island has become like not a very nice place to be, and that makes me sad as a viewer, but also it successfully puts you on edge.
Absolutely does. And one of the big question marks around what's going on in the present day on the island is what the hell is going on with John Locke, because as we've already seen, John Locke off the island is dead. He got off the island to come and round everyone up and bring them back, and then he was brutally killed by Ben Linus off the island. But Jack brought Locke's coffin and his dead body on the plane with them when they crash land again. And all of a sudden, they crash land on the island. This is just like first time round, where Locke crash landed on the island first time round and he could miraculously walk. Second time round, they've crash landed and Locke is alive, right? And he seems like Locke, although maybe is acting a little differently.
It's weird for me, too.
Excuse me?
I realize how strange this all is. Me, here. But I assure you, son, I'm the same man I've always been.
Yeah, I never questioned that it wasn't Locke, but he had like more of a purpose to him, and like I think obviously we're led to believe that that's probably what would happen. I know they say you got to emulate the constraints under which you flew originally for this to work, for us to crash on that island. You know, so Locke was a proxy for Jack's dad, who had been in a coffin on the island, and that whole aspect to it is like really, really cool. But I always thought to myself, well, it's Locke, isn't it? Like he's so important. He's obviously going to come back to life. So when I saw him, I was like, there we go. But he seems to have this kind of like this ethereality to him, and he kind of knows things, and it puts Ben really out of sorts, which I like that. I like that Locke's kind of like, you know, but then obviously it's revealed that it's not actually Locke at all, and it's and I remember just screaming at my TV for not the first and not the last time. in Lost.
One of the all-time great twists, right? And of course, a character that we haven't really talked about yet properly, but a name that's been mentioned for a few seasons at this point is this mysterious leader called Jacob, right? Who like we've never seen, and he is this like mysterious being that seems to be the boss of the others, that seems to make the big decisions about who becomes the leader and this and that and the other. We know that Ben has kind of been taking orders from Jacob, but maybe has never seen him. There's this mysterious character called Richard. It's almost too long to go into at this point, right? But he seems to not age, but he seems to have this direct line with Jacob. Jacob, right, as a very interesting character who finally we get to meet at the end of season 5.
Very funny character, Jacob, because it's like he is really important, but he's also he's more important as an idea, I guess, than as a character, because we meet him and then he's swiftly killed off. But what we learn about Jacob is that he's one half of a duo that have been on the island for centuries, basically. But he is kind of the reason, not just our characters, but over the years, there could have been many other TV shows about Lost, but like focused on like the Black Rock ship or like random whatever. Yeah. He's brought like a sea of characters of people to the island in the hopes of finding a replacement as protector. He is the protector. So there's that amazing episode where we see kind of all the characters at some stage of their lives. Jacob meet them and kind of like touch them and shake their hands or whatever, and like give young Sawyer the pen to write his revenge letter to the real Sawyer. Yeah. He's been there, these instrumental moments of their lives, kind of guiding them there, to the island. So their lives were always on a crash course, no pun intended, to end up on the island in the hopes of maybe one day them being the new Jacob.
And that is essentially the thrust of the whole show, really. Like, that's why they're here. They were chosen to come and be potential candidates to lead this mystical island, basically, right?
Yeah. It's wild, really. And then the whole Man in Black side of it is so naughty and immense, but it's actually, I like it. I think it's really good.
I love it too. This is to remind people, right? You've got these two ancient beings who are revealed to be on the island. One is Jacob, and the other one is this man in black, right? We don't find out his name. In the season finale of season 5, the opening scene begins. For the first time, we see these two men. They're sitting on the beach. It could be hundreds and hundreds of years ago, centuries ago. Jacob is wearing white, and this man in black sits next to him. And the man in black doesn't seem to like Jacob very much, right?
Do you have any idea how badly I want to kill you?
Yes.
One of these days, sooner or later, I'm going to find a loophole, my friend.
Well, when you do, I'll be right here.
Always nice talking to you, Jacob.
Nice talking to you, too.
So obviously this is really important, and it's setting us up for season 6, which really delves into the kind of supernatural mythology of the island and these two kind of godlike figures that watch over it. You've got one is dark, one is light, right? You've got Jacob, who is the kind of I guess, quote unquote, good one. And then you've got the man in black, who is the bad one. The man in black, it turns out, is the smoke monster. So the smoke monster that's been killing people every season is this kind of yin to Jacob's yang, I suppose. And we don't quite know why at this point, but he really wants to kill Jacob, but he can't. But of course, he's set a huge plan into motion whereby he has hijacked the body of John Locke. This John Locke that we've seen throughout season 5, who seems to have miraculously come back from the dead, isn't actually Locke. It is the smoke monster who has kind of assumed his form, just so that he can then find a way to kill Jacob, so that he can find his loophole.
Hello, Jacob.
You found your loophole?
Indeed I did. And you have no idea what I've gone through to be here.
It's a very cool little reveal, isn't it?
Yeah, and what I know about that is it throws forward so many ideas and crazy theories that I think about regularly, and still I'm like, it blows my mind. But like, there's a scene where where actual Locke is in the jungle when the island's hopping through time, and Richard comes out of the jungle. Locke's just been shot in the leg and he's suffering, he can't really move. Richard comes out with a medical kit and he removes the bullet, and Locke's like, how did you know there was a bullet in my leg? And he says, you told me. And he says, I didn't tell you that I was been. He says, oh, well, you will. And then Richard says, you're going to have to convince them all to come back. How am I going to do that? He says, and Richard says, you're going to have to die. Now, later on in the season, when Locke has died and his body has come back to the island and the man in black has assumed his identity, that version of Locke is what tells Richard to go and tell Locke he has to die. So it's this crazy loophole of where does it...
I love it.
Yeah, it's mad. It blows my mind.
I love the time loop paradoxes in this, because isn't there something to do with the compass as well that gets given to Locke as a little boy, but it was actually given to... there's something that doesn't... There's like a time loop to do with a compass, isn't there?
Yeah. So here, even Richard gives Locke the compass. So the compass is basically getting past all this loophole from Richard to Locke to fake Locke to whoever, to Richard again to... and it's one of these there's a process that's designed to maybe pick who the future protector of the island can be. And there's this episode where young Locke is presented with all these items, and Richard says which one of these items already belongs to you.
Yes.
And of course there's a compass there, but he doesn't pick the compass, which is why at that point in time he doesn't get selected and ends up living until he lands on the island, a miserable life.
Interesting. So you've got, and the time loop stuff comes into importance in our 70s group as well, where it all culminates with the incident at the end, which is this interesting idea where they've discovered that there is the hatch is being built, right? And it's being built around this big pocket of electromagnetic energy that could blow up and it could destroy the whole island, right? And they kind of surmise, based on Daniel Faraday, the physicist, that if they blow up that site where the hatch is being built, the hatch will never get built. Therefore, they won't be pressing the button every 108 minutes. Therefore, it will never cause a ripple effect that will cause the plane to crash, that will cause our survivors to land on the beach in the first place. So they could essentially wipe the timeline clean and save themselves from ever being on this island if they blow up the hatch, right? Is that right? Did I get that right?
You've got it completely right. And I would love the idea of someone listening to this who's never watched Lost, by the way, because they would just be like, what is Mike smoking today?
I love it so much. This is like crack to me, this kind of stuff. It's so good, but
it's so ingenious. And what a way of like bringing it full circle with the hatch, like just like bringing, we've not forgotten this thing that was there in season 2.
So good.
Yeah,
so good.
It's a great idea. And of course, this causes a big old division of, we'll never meet.
Yeah.
And then Jack's like, yeah, but all the misery we've gone through it just won't have happened. But then, whatever happened.
Yes, and then there's this thing there, exactly. Miles says, because we've been told throughout the whole series, whatever happened, and Miles is like, but hang on, maybe this is the thing we were always supposed to do. Maybe blowing up the hatch is what causes the hatch to be the hatch, and therefore this was always what we were destined to do, right?
Great
so there's this
scene,
amazing kind of mystery surrounding it.
Has it occurred to any of you that your buddy's actually going to cause the thing he says he's trying to prevent? Perhaps that little nuke is the incident. So maybe the best thing to do is nothing. I'm glad you all thought this through.
It's so good, right? So Jack is on this mission. He's turned fully into a man of faith, right? He believes that doing this will solve all of their problems, wipe the timeline clean, save all of their lives, and reverse everything back to the way it was before they first crash landed on the island. So he has this hydrogen bomb, and the season 5 finale, for me, is one of the all-time great finales. It culminates in this incredibly upsetting scene where they drop the bomb down the hole, they wait for it to go off, it doesn't. Instead, some kind of electromagnetic incident occurs. Juliet then is sucked down the hole. There's this really emotional moment between Sawyer and Juliet, this wonderful couple who have only been together in season 5 for kind of half a season, but in the reality of the show, they've been together for 3 years at this point, right? And it's an incredibly moving moment as she drops down that hole.
It's okay.
Don't you leave me.
I love you.
No, you don't let go.
I love you, James.
No.
I love you so much.
This, like I said earlier, this whole middle section of Lost, seasons 3, 4, and 5, the whole time that Juliet is in the show basically is my favourite stuff. And this is a beautiful, gut-wrenching ending to her story. Yeah. But I have some questions for you, Jacob. I have some... this is something that I've never quite been able to get my head around. God. The incident. What actually happens here? Juliet falls down that hole and she knocks the hydrogen bomb against a rock with the intention of detonating it, right? And then, of course, the show ends. It cuts to black, or it cuts to white, in fact, right? And we never quite know, because in season 6, which we'll get to in a moment, all of our characters have zapped back to the present day, and nothing has really changed, right? The island is still there. Everything is still the same. It's just that how our characters have travelled back through time. What actually happened? Did the bomb go off? If so, why didn't it do anything? Did it send them back forward through time? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so my hunch of the incident is that what Miles said is true, and that the bomb kind of got the explosion, the blast that Juliet set off was subsumed by the energy around where around the hatch site, and it created what had to be then tempered by the button. And by some other degrees, the key that Desmond pulled. And I think that what that then happened to the people who didn't belong in that time period is they got thrust forward in time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think it does kind of like, it's almost like it ends the time jumps once and for all, basically.
Right, yeah,
maybe it's a convenient way of it happening, but I think this idea that it was going to stop the plane from ever landing didn't work.
It's also clever. Everything in season 5, I think, is so fucking clever. I think this is when the show is at its smartest, because it feels like there aren't many plot holes. It all kind of makes sense. I love the whole idea that they have created their own destiny in this way, like them... like Saeed shooting little Ben too.
Oh,
this
yeah.
kind of whole idea of would you kill Hitler as a baby, right? Like, so to kill evil villain Ben when he's a child, but actually was that the thing that caused him to become Ben, right? Because he shoots him, right? And then the others take wounded Ben and they're like, we'll save him, but he will never be the same again after this. And it's like,
be the same again.
So Saeed actually created Ben, evil Ben, essentially, right? It's so good.
So in many ways, like Saeed's dismal future, past at this point when he was off the island working for Ben as a hitman. He's got himself to blame for all of it.
It's so good. It's so good. All of that stuff is amazing. I think the incident is my favourite season finale too.
Is it? So nice.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And just like, again, to mention that moment, the end of the arc of Sawyer and Juliet for me, and that moment when they're kind of, she's hanging over the cliff and he has to, like, that stuff is so good, right?
It's so emotional.
So
that's definitely the moment I cry at most freely. I get actually angry with myself. I'm a bit emotionless when I watch things. So I'm like, I don't really cry a lot, but Lost could just, on a dime, just get me. And that's definitely one of the scenes. I think there was also an air of inevitability to Juliet's death in this season. I don't know why. I always felt that they were gearing up to it and I was really dreading it. Like when you watch anything where there's a character you love, you're like, oh, please just let them make it through, and then it becomes increasingly clear, or you just have a gut feeling that isn't going to happen and you just kind of want to stop watching. I kind of had that with Lost season 5. Not that I ever would have stopped watching, but I was like, I just feel like this is going to be distressing. Yeah.
That is an interesting thing I was going to ask you, a very silly hypothetical question here. Let's just say in an alternative universe, like Lost had been cancelled after 5 seasons, and that incident was the last ever episode we ever got of Lost, and it ended on that dip to white, the bomb goes off. Like, almost think, would that have created the show? Would that have made the show a little bit more of a kind of cult favorite over time? Because, like, I don't know, there is something about it, I think, that feels like a really great ending too. Like them completing their loop potentially, or wiping the timeline clean. Either way, Juliet kind of feels like she's at the end of her arc. I think certain characters too, like Sawyer and Saeed, based on how little I think they get to do in season 6, kind of feel like they've reached the end of their arcs as well. And apart from the stuff happening in 2007, which is a big cliffhanger, I kind of feel like the incident almost feels like we're reaching the end of these characters' arcs too. Do you know what I mean?
I've never thought about it, and it's really interesting. And you're probably right. I think maybe it wouldn't have lost a lot of fans in the way that it did with season 6, which I agree with you. There are definitely, and Saeed is a casualty of season 6 in many ways.
Yeah,
I have to agree with you there. It would have definitely. I mean, the way the screen goes to white, like you say, when it always ends on black and the word lost bursts up in white writing, and it reversed that, would have been like a great way to end the show. Like, my God.
Well, it almost could have been like, I mean, obviously it would have been a devastatingly frustrating ending in the way that Twin Peaks had a devastatingly frustrated ending initially, right? Where you'd be left with all these questions of, did they succeed in their plan? Did they wipe the timeline clean and save themselves? Or did they actually cause that loop and they all died in that explosion and it caused the hatch to be built and we were just in a circle? And I think either way, you could interpret that as an ending. Almost, right?
I mean, especially
I think it's kind of
because they had obviously an idea that they were going to do in season 6, which was very divisive. That maybe it would have been more, for many, it would have been more satisfying had Lost got the axe before.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. But like, obviously, it does have an incredible actual ending, which I would love and never take away. That's the thing. So let's finish by talking about season 6, which is divisive, right? Like I've already mentioned, I think for me it's my least favorite. But what are your thoughts generally on season 6?
Season 6 is a very, very weird season of television. It's very different in tone to the rest of Lost. It's very dark, and it's very like, these characters have gone through so much and they're not necessarily the friends they were anymore because they've been separated for so long, many of them, and they don't really have the allegiances or that they thought they might have had. And with that, it throws forward, it gets quite uncomfortable. And actually, as a fan, and I kind of got this from season 4 onwards, but I didn't mind it so much because I always knew that they'd come back together in some way. But it's this realization that maybe the fates of these characters, it's not the happy one you'd hope it would be from the beginning. And seeing that kind of come to life is actually quite challenging at times to watch. It is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, this season is so, this show is so interesting, the way it shifts its genres and it goes from kind of action adventure to sci-fi. And I feel like also season 6, it very much becomes supernatural. Like we're now dealing with gods and temples and mystical pools of light. And, I think it's kind of done with the time travel sci-fi stuff, right? It's done with all of the Dharma stuff. It's done with the electromagnetism. All of that stuff, it kind of feels like it's been completed now, right? And now we're down to what actually is the island and how does it work and who are these mystical godlike people that run it, I think. And I don't know whether there was ever a satisfying way to explain that would please everyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree. It kind of, maybe devil's advocate, because I do enjoy it. Maybe there was a lot of people who were critical of Lost were season 6 gave them reason to go see why I was critical of Lost.
I know, which is, I mean, I don't agree with that either. And I think there is stuff about season 6 which is excellent still.
Yeah.
I think just compared to how good for me seasons 4 and 5 were, it feels like a bit of a dip downwards after that amazing momentum, And it also
as well, like, I know we probably talk about it, but like the flash sideways element of season 6 was really, it's polarizing for good reason, because like, I think what it does really well in hindsight, at the time you're like, okay, like, what am I watching here? But it all builds to the immensely cathartic finale. And I think the finale is made more cathartic because you've had a season of these flash sideways where the characters have kind of been walking around with each other in this potential alternate timeline where the plane landed in Los Angeles without knowing who they are, and then suddenly they start remembering this time they had together on the island, and you realise that it's something else altogether. And that is amazing, and that builds to an amazing conclusion. But it can be quite frustrating, even for a long-time fan to watch and be like, this isn't really fitting into the vibe of the episode I'm watching in the way that flashback thematically would have worked its way in or whatever.
Yes, you're absolutely right, because I think what we're presented with is what seems to be just two very different storylines running parallel rather than them connecting to each other, right? So let's just rewind for a second. Let's just remind people that the overall story of season 6. So season 5 ended on this ginormous question mark, right? What the hell is going to happen? Juliet detonated a bomb. The screen cut to white. Did that wipe their timeline clean? Did it kill them all? Or did it send them back to 2007 and everything carries on as normal? Well, the answer is, as we're presented in season 6, both. Right? We end up with two timelines in season 6. So Lost has always done this. It always flashes back and forward, back and forward. In season 6, we get all of our characters waking up in the present day on the island. The bomb was detonated, they didn't wipe the timeline, and they're back in the present day on the island and nothing's changed. Boo-hoo, right? Yeah. But then we're also presented with what fans call flash sideways, right? They're not flash forwards or back. Now we're getting glimpses of an alternate reality where they did land safely in LAX back at the beginning of season 1. They never crash landed on the island. And throughout season 6, we have these two seemingly disconnected timelines that have nothing to do with each other. The present day stuff on the island, and like I said, we'll get into it, but it's all very supernatural. There are, mystical temples and hieroglyphs and these two gods and, this smoke monster and all this stuff. And then you've got the flash sideways, which is all of our characters living their lives, having landed safely in LAX, but sort of strange things starting to happen as their paths all cross again. But the frustrating thing about this, I think, is that when you've watched it for the first time, it doesn't really feel like there are any stakes to that flash sideways. It's kind of like, oh, well, here's just an alternative timeline. Here's what could have happened to them kind of thing. And people are kind of like, we don't really care about this stuff.
So what, you just down under for vacation?
Actually, I went on a walkabout.
Really? Like Crocodile Dundee?
No, not exactly. But it was pretty intense. We spent 10 days in the outback and nothing but our packs and our knives. We slept under the stars and made our own fires, hunted our own food.
Wow. I wouldn't make it 2 days without my cell phone.
And yeah, that mystery of what is happening in the flash sideways is interesting, because I think at the beginning I found it frustrating on first watch, but now when I rewatch it, I think the flash sideways are my favourite part.
That's great.
And I think the stuff that happens on the island for me in season 6 is the weakest stuff. It's interesting.
That's completely proof of the fact that I think it presented itself as a big mystery. What is this sideways thing? But kind of unfairly so. It did that storyline or that element a disservice, because what it actually is doing is, when you view it in isolation away from the island stuff as this precursor to the finale, it is quite wonderful.
It is.
It doesn't surprise me to hear that, but I actually think I might agree with you. Yeah,
I love it. I love that stuff, and it is absolutely playing on our own fan nostalgia.
Absolutely.
But of course, it gives the writers free rein to bring back Charlie, to bring back all of these characters that we've loved. We get to see actual Locke being actual John Locke as well, right? Rather than Smokey Locke. And so it's a great narrative way of kind of giving the fans everything they want, while we're also seeing, like you mentioned, there's quite dark stuff going on the island where our characters are split apart. Characters like Saeed. I think for me, this is my least favourite thing about the show as a whole, is what they did to Saeed in season 6. It just feels a bit messy and a bit bleak, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that they kill him and then they bring him back, but he's kind of evil, but he's kind of not.
Like a zombie,
and
isn't he?
I felt that was a bit of a sad end to his character's arc. You know,
I do agree with you there. It's very odd. It's got some like funny little moments, but that aside, it's actually quite sad to see. You know, Saeed, who, I mean, he was quite a dreary character, not drearily played, but like his story was always so bleak. That to see him have this like kind of bleak conclusion to his arc, it doesn't sit as nicely with me as it would have if it had been done another way. That's for sure.
We get a couple of a couple of big momentous episodes in season 6, right? The first one is the Richard flashback episode, where we find out the backstory of this mystery character who doesn't ever seem to age, right? Who has been on the island for hundreds of years, and that is a beautiful episode. I think, like, I love that episode of television. It's
agreed.
So good.
Lost did those mythological episodes really well, I think. And Richard was a character that had been around since season 3, and I think he'd always been on the outskirts and slowly wound his way in, and you knew he had this anchor to the heart of the mysteries of the show. And in this episode, you kind of learned the extent of that, and it's done really well. And Nestor Carbonell, who plays him, it's astonishing in this episode.
So good.
And like, you know, you learn about, you know, he's got a romantic backstory with a character called Isabella who, you know, and it stands just in a couple of scenes. You just feel it. It's so well written.
Yeah, it is. And also this episode it provides us for the first time with something that is the closest we'll get to an explanation of what this island is, right? It comes the closest so far, 6 seasons into actually explaining the island. And it's a very brief scene between Jacob, like the guardian of the island, and Richard when he first arrives. And Richard sort of says, "What is this place?" And Jacob kind of demonstrates that the island, he uses a bottle and a cork, right, to explain that the island is the thing that is keeping all of the evil in the world at bay and stopping it from escaping.
Think of this wine as what you keep calling hell. There's many other names for it, too. Malevolence, evil, darkness. And here it is, swirling around in the bottle, unable to get out, because if it did, it would spread. The cork is this island. And it's the only thing keeping the darkness where it belongs.
So there's that, which is kind of as good an explanation as we need, I think, for the island. But then, of course, we get another episode, controversial episode, I would say, called Across the Sea, right? Which is the origin story of the Man in Black and Jacob, set thousands or possibly millions of years in the past, right? And it is essentially the episode that explains who Jacob and the Man in Black are, how they got their mystical powers, and it kind of explains the island as being this mystical place with this light in the middle of it and this pool of water that has all of its power. It's, I don't know, what did you make of that episode, which essentially, you know, it comes right before the finale, and it's essentially the episode that is going, here is everything you need to know about the actual mythology of Lost.
Yes, I think the timing of the episode it hurt it a little bit. I think maybe if it came a bit sooner, and I know it's hard because you want to extend the mystery of the Man in Black for as long as you can, but I think a lot of people were just at this point, you don't see our characters at all, right? Apart from archival footage, and it's like we're so late near the end now. I really miss those characters. As a standalone episode, I actually don't mind it at all. I never disliked it. I remember I watched it at uni with a bunch of people around me, and they were all a bit stunned about like what the hell is going on. And I never really had that response. I think, you know, you're learning some really big things, and I think the thing is, it's that whole thing of if you answer everything in Lost, you know, sometimes the answers are just going to be not as satisfying, not because they're unsatisfying by nature, but just the very idea of if you've been waiting to find out something for so long and then you find it out, you're just predisposed to be a bit disappointed.
Agreed. I think they shouldn't have tried to explain it as much as they did. I almost think that, like, giving us the big pool of light that was all the goodness in the world, and that just, I don't know, it felt a bit hokey almost to me. I think that stuff didn't work so well, you know?
Yeah. It's like they threw the Man in Black in, and then he just spat out as a smoke monster. And
yes, and it's like, well, why? I don't really understand that. And but you know, there is stuff about it that I do also really like. I like this backstory of these two men that are actually just like flawed little boys with like petty differences. And it's this thing that is ongoing, right? We talked about it at the very beginning, but each season it's like we meet these every time we think we've got two leaders, there are two people beyond them. It's like Jack and Locke, and then it's like Ben and Charles Whitmore, who we never even mentioned, but then there's Jacob. And then there's Jacob and the Man in Black, right? But there are always these like leader figures who we think will have all the power and all the answers, and it turns out they know fuck all, and they're just flawed men.
They just don't have
and it's the same even as high up as Jacob and the Man in Black, doesn't it? And I kind of like that idea that actually Jacob is just a bit of a nothing character, it turns out.
I like that as well, you know, because it definitely feels Jack's arc in last night. My whole life I've been jumping to the tune of this guy, who might actually not even be that important or whatever. I also like the idea that it all stems from like, because there's a lot of parental issues in Lost, like a lot of the characters. And of course, you've got Jacob and the Man in Black's mum, played by Alison Janney in that episode we were just talking about. And she herself obviously is there for a reason, has been told stuff by someone before her, and it's just like the idea of the scope of the backstory of the island is quite huge. So that is really hard to kind of convey it all in an episode just before the last ever episode of Lost. I think it was just
exactly,
it's a hard one to nail, and I think they in my opinion they did it, but with some, you know, misgivings.
Which leaves then the season 6 finale, Jacob, and the series finale, which we need to talk about in depth, because, you know, people have so many opinions on this finale. And essentially, we've got in the present day, we've got, you know, everything coming to a head on the island. All of our main characters are finally about to leave the island. They're going to get off on the Ajira plane, right, and fly home to safety. But you've got evil Locke / the Man in Black, who is attempting to, you know, turn out the light in the middle of the island, which will essentially destroy the island. The island starts to kind of crumble into the sea. He's doing this so that he can escape into the real world, but we can't let him escape because that will unleash all of this evil and destroy the world, essentially. So Jack and Locke have this huge kind of fight on this cliffside as the island is kind of just being destroyed. All of that is going on. Meanwhile, in the Flash Sideways, it's finally revealed what the Flash Sideways are. And this is the great stuff in the season finale, I think, because all of these characters living their lives, not having any memory of the island, suddenly start to kind of wake up, right? They have these kind of connections when they bump into other people that meant the most to them on the island. So like Charlie will bump into Claire, or Kate will have this moment with Claire and Aaron, or Juliet will bump into Sawyer, and they will have this moment that triggers the memories of their other life. And essentially what it turns out to be is that everything in the Flash Sideways is actually some kind of afterlife, right? And all of them are dead in this reality of the Flash Sideways.
The most important part of your life was the time that you spent with these people. That's why all of you are here. Nobody does it alone, Jack. You needed all of them, and they needed you.
For what?
To remember and to let go.
My eyes threaten to leave their head whenever I see Lost mentioned in worst finales of all time lists. Like, I just think, just get a grip of yourselves.
Yeah.
Separate the expectation, the unthinkable expectation, from what you watch. I think this is why I really, really actually overjoyed that I do think it's in the process of being reappraised. Because at its heart, you know, the fake Locke stuff and everything else, and their mission to leave the island and whatnot, the light at the heart of the island is, that is obviously a big part of the finale. And I think for what it's worth, I think the stakes feel very high. It feels very final, and it feels apocalyptic. And I think that's what it needs to feel.
Yeah.
But as you say, the real crowning jewel of the finale is the Sunflash Sideways. And I just think ultimately, what a beautiful, reassuring depiction of the afterlife it presents.
And it's really earned these moments where I just love it so much when the characters come to their realizations, like when they remember. There's these moments that they have, and ultimately this is what pissed some people off, and I think for other people it made this show what it is. But the finale was basically the Damon and Carlton saying this show was never really about the island. It was about these people and their connections to each other, right? And like whether or not that you'll find that really frustrating or not, I think is up to everyone. But I think it did a beautiful job of kind of giving us these characters that we spent 6 years with, and really like letting us feel the weight of that when those moments when they would connect with someone else and they would suddenly like wake up and remember everything. And what every one of those moments is just a joy, isn't it? It's so good.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And what better moment to convey it than by showing us flashes from the show of their moments, like a celebration of what we've seen over the past 6 years, and an acknowledgement that everything we've seen has mattered and it happened.
Yes.
And I want to repeat to anyone who is in any doubt, it all happened.
It all happened. Yeah.
Because if it didn't all happen, those moments would lose their weight instantly.
Yeah.
And maybe a part of the reason a lot of people don't like it is because they watched it live and they saw the archival footage of the plane wreckage without the survivors there and assumed that was an indication that it was purgatory all along, which was, had nothing to do with the creatives behind the show. But for me, it's just this, as you say, celebration of characters, celebration of what they mean to each other, and a celebration of all the beautiful moments we'd seen throughout the show, just at its most nostalgic.
Do you have a favourite in these kind of character reunion moments that happen in the finale? Do you have a favourite moment?
The Sawyer and Juliet one is a bit of a cheat, really, because it's like that season, Sawyer's been mourning Juliet, and you're just like, so it's like a one season payoff thing or whatever. But it is beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah.
For me, the actual moment is Jack and Christian, his father, because it's so wonderful. It's a 6-season payoff that Jack and his relationship with his dad has been so huge, and without Christian there shepherding them without Christian there, because he's been this like unseen presence in Jack's mind this whole time, and like he's seen him walk around the island, obviously not for real, it's the man in black assuming his body, whatever, but in his past, like he's such a fractured man, and whenever you've seen them, there's never really been any, they've always been in each other's throats, and to see them in that moment and to see him finally be able to embrace his father and realise that it's all, about his life on the island and about all his friends who are waiting for him in the other room. It's, for me, just immensely gratifying. And it's from that moment onwards, when the music kicks in, the Jacob School kicks in, that the tears just flow.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, all of those moments for me throughout the episode get me. For some reason, for me, it's Jack and Locke. It's when Jack wakes up with Locke, and that moment of again, Matthew Fox, I don't know, there's something about Matthew Fox when he gets emotional, really gets me in those moments, but I think that's a really beautiful moment. But they're all amazing.
It's a moment that we've been it's been snatched from us.
Yes.
Jack, a post-faith Jack, kind of having that moment with Locke or whatever. So seeing it is really lovely. Yeah.
I also love the moment with my fave Ben as well, not going into the church.
Beautiful.
And there's this amazing, again, this kind of mess with time situation in that they've all lived out their whole lives at different lengths. And at this point, we haven't mentioned, but Hurley has become the leader of the island, and he's taken Ben with him on that, right?
It was always going to be Hurley, wasn't it?
It was always going to be Hurley. So Hurley becomes the new Jacob. And so by the time we get to this moment in the church where they've all died, Ben has lived out this however long life with Hurley. And you get just like a really beautiful little moment with Ben and a couple of characters outside the church, which I loved as well, you know?
Yeah, and it's such a lovely moment for him to say, I'm not going to go in, and I'm sorry I made your life such a misery. Because he's, you know, he's obviously remembers his life, and he just in that moment apologising to Locke. It's just like, you really did make his life such a misery. And it's, the human side of Ben is shown in this afterlife, and it just, I like the idea that, you know, it's never too late to repent or whatever. Not that me or you have done anything half as bad as Ben Linus.
Yeah, let's hope not.
But it's nice to know that I could just be like, you know, in the afterlife, be like, I'm sorry I stole your sandwiches, or I don't know, I've never stolen a sandwich. I don't know what to do.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
I'm very sorry for what I did to you, John. I was selfish, jealous. I wanted everything you had. What did I have? You were special, John. And I wasn't.
The whole idea of Hurley and Ben, right? And they've got to get Desmond home. So there's a whole show there.
Oh,
that we could
love
watch.
That. I would love that. Because yes, there are gaps, right? And obviously what we get is in the end on the present day. So you've got who escaping on the plane, right? You've got Kate and Sawyer. As far as
Miles,
we know, they go off and live happily ever after. Claire, Miles with the baby, right? Jack is left. And again, beautiful moment of symmetry, right? That mirrors the very beginning where Jack lies down. Vincent, the dog, is there.
Runs out. I mean, it's what that's doing is it's playing to expectation, but also it works.
It works.
It was always going to end that way, and it works.
Yeah, it's satisfying, right?
Yeah.
Jack comes to the end of his arc. He lies down to die. The last thing he sees is the plane of survivors leaving the island, and then we get that close-up of the eye as he dies. Like, perfect. Like you said, it was always going to end that way, but it works. It does work.
It works. Why mess with it?
It's a satisfying end. Yeah,
totally.
It's so good. And that's kind of it. That's Lost, right? There are loads of things there are loads of things that we had to skip over and skim over. There are things that got explained, but there are loads of big open questions too. The numbers, Jacob. What did the numbers have to do with anything ultimately?
So, my explanation of the numbers is that it doesn't get like an official explanation. But my read on it is, you know, when Locke, the man in black, brings Sawyer to his cave and he explains to him that there are candidates.
Yeah.
And on the wall, there's loads of surnames written, and they're all scratched out. The only ones that are remaining at that point in time are number 4, number 8, number 15, number 16, number 23, and number 42. And it's like
so
Shepherd,
it's the
Quan,
5 candidates or whatever.
Yeah. That's my reading. Is that ultimately it was always going to be that those numbers pertained to the candidates.
And it makes sense then that of all the candidates, it was Hurley that became the leader, and Hurley was the one that had the connection with those numbers, right? Yeah.
Even better. You're just cementing the exactly.
Love it. It's nice and neat. And what were the other were there any other big burning things that never got answered? Like, I'm trying to think now.
The one that is never got answered that I love didn't get answered, and it's not a huge burning mystery by any stretch, but it's like definitely an unanswered question. Is season 5 when they're jumping through time and they arrive, I think, at some point in the future, and they find 2 outriggers on the beach with an Nigeria Airways bottle, and then they take it out to go like Sawyer, Miles, Juliet, and Locke to go around the island. And as they're doing it, they look back and they see a bunch of people marching out the jungle, getting on the other outrigger, taking chase, and start firing at them.
That's right, yeah.
And then fortunately, the time jumps again, and then they move and they're gone. But you never work out who those people are.
I love it.
And I love that as well.
Will we ever get a spin-off show, Jacob, do you think? Do you think we'll ever get a show that takes place in the Lost universe?
My HUD says one day they will, they'll obviously go looking, and Disney own it, right, or whatever. So they, the spin-off potential is huge. They probably will. I think Damon and Carlton will not be a part of it.
Yeah.
Or JJ. I think it would be completely new. Maybe you and I should just sit come up with some ideas and just pitch.
Perfect.
Should we do it?
Let's
if anyone's going to do it, and
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
But no,
for sure.
I think they will one day, but I hope not too soon. How about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, I would like to go back to this world, I think, although it would be tough because you feel like you've seen the most major events in this world. It would almost have to be something a little bit more low key, wouldn't it, I think?
Yeah, you couldn't do it as expansive as that in terms like too many spinning plates. It'd have to, I mean, imagine like seeing I know people always said like a cop spin-off, like, the Flash Sideways with Sawyer and Miles.
Yeah.
Like a True Detective style cop spin. Something like that would obviously be really fun. Like a real HBO gritty style show with Ken Leon and Josh Holloway. I mean, I'd watch the shit out of that.
Or you could get a really fun like Desmond, almost like Quantum Leap style Desmond jumping around in time and like
would watch that.
saving people.
You just know Henry A. Cusick would be like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, obviously, I will do that.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, Jacob, as well, I feel like there is some other stuff that we should talk about and acknowledge, right? Which is some of the kind of revelations that have surfaced about what went on behind the scenes on Lost. There was a big piece that was published in Vanity Fair in May of this year. A piece by Maureen Ryan called Lost Illusions, the Untold Story of the Hit Show's Poisonous Culture. And it is a pretty damning piece about the show's creators, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, right? And the way in which they treated their actors, the writers, particularly kind of women and people of colour, that there was this kind of toxic environment of kind of racism and misogyny and various other things and kind of bullying, right? It's a very long, in-depth piece, and it's pretty sad to see, right? What was your reaction when you read this piece?
Yeah, I was really crushed when I read the piece, truth be told, and it kind of left me, as I hope it left anyone who loves Lost, really kind of questioning their relationship with this show and how to move forward when talking about the show, when celebrating the show, when watching the show, because there are some really, really, really awful stories in that piece and testimonies from writers who got mistreated or whatever, and it doesn't really paint Damon or Carlton in the best light, and I think Damon especially has tried to reckon with it more recently, and which that's one thing, I just think for me, it left me really for a week, really distraught. Selfishly, because I was worried that my show's, the show I love's legacy, would be tainted forevermore. And I watched an episode or two during that time, and it didn't hit in the same way. I'll be honest with you. And it's only been since talking about it with other fans, watching other people talk about it on YouTube channels or podcasts or whatever, that I've kind of come to realise that, there's a lot of people involved in the making of Lost, and that is a chapter of the, we're talking about it today, right? That's a chapter that is part of the legacy of that show now, whether we like it or not. And that's important to address and to embrace. There's no going back. However,
I think that's
what's your thoughts?
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's so hard, isn't it? And this has happened so much, obviously, over the last few years with stuff being revealed about creators that we love, and very, very similar thing, obviously, with Buffy and with Joss Whedon as well. Like a very similar thing, that kind of toxic bullying kind of culture. And when maybe Joss Whedon even more so, because that show is so authored by him, it feels like, right? Like his voice is so distinct in a way. It is hard. I talked about that with people on this podcast when we did a kind of Buffy retrospective, and it is hard, and it's like, as a fan, you do have to kind of reckon with that, and it does affect how you watch it, I think, when you go back and revisit it, doesn't it?
I think especially, and I mean with Joss Whedon and creating so many badass women characters, and then him being whatever he is, it really creates bad taste in your mouth. And I think in Lost's case, I was really disheartened to see the racist comments.
Yeah.
And how black writers were felt to be discluded because they weren't agreeing or accepting of this racist nature of the writers' room, and Lost is such a bastion of diversity.
Right. It's so interesting, isn't it? That weird irony, like you say, that Buffy was this feminist show run by this quite misogynist man, and you're right, that Lost was this, it was so celebrated as being this kind of interesting, diverse cast, right? And there was all this toxic behaviour behind the scenes. And Harold Perrineau, I know he's spoken about it quite a lot over the years, hasn't he? But the character of Michael and the way that character was treated and the way that then he was treated and just kind of written off the show. We talked about it a little bit already, but like that stuff it's hard to watch that now, isn't it? I think with like knowing all of that stuff.
It really is. And it's funny because, Michael's arc, like we've spoken about, is it's a weird one and everything. And it isn't until you watch him in from the show that he's in at the minute, where you do realise kind of how much he was slept on in Lost and wasted in a way. So when you read those pieces, and Harold Perrineau so bravely is someone who has been outspoken about it, within the cast, it tracks. It tracks because his character is just kind of thrown to the wayside. So I'm not going to lie, it will be in my mind when I watch the show going forwards.
It's hard, and I think everyone reckons with it in their own way, that kind of stuff, right? To some people it might put them off the show entirely. One of the things that we said when we talked about Buffy was that it's almost like that show doesn't belong to Joss Whedon anymore. It sort of belongs to the fans, right? And it's fans can still enjoy it and get something out of it themselves that isn't about that man behind the scenes, right? And I do think to an extent that is the case with Lost as well. I think we can still celebrate it as fans of that show for what it is, but like you say, kind of acknowledge that there was this other stuff going on. I
agree. I completely agree. It's very emblematic of life, isn't it? Nothing is plain sailing, but there's a lot of people who contribute with all of these shows to make it what it is. I wouldn't begrudge anyone saying, don't want to watch it anymore because of that, because that's each their own. That is absolutely valid.
Do you think that Damon Lindelof has kind of tried to sort of reckon with this, even ahead of this piece coming out, the stuff that he's done since The Leftovers and Watchmen and stuff, it does feel like he's sort of tried, because he's always been quite outspoken about not so much the toxic culture stuff, but the mistakes he made on Lost, right? And he's been quite open about that kind of stuff. And I wonder if it has kind of played on his mind, the way that he treated people on Lost.
Watchmen especially seems like an apology of sorts for any past behaviour, or comments, which is, if anything, the comments that I read, it made me look at Watchmen in a different light even more. Because if that's an apology show, fine, and that's it's all good. But he is now, and I've seen it said on social media, but he is now very much a showrunner who is praised as being, one of the white men in the industry who really helps diverse writers who don't have as much opportunities perhaps in the industry. He celebrates them, and maybe falsely so, maybe it's all built on sham, but that's people again are valid to think that, but I'm just I can't, the fact that people think that plays on my mind, because he is someone who I defend staunchly,
absolutely,
with his work, but that is if it was built on that, it does change the legacy of the show. It does change it. It does change it.
Do you mind if I ask as well, as the host of the Lost Boys podcast, would you have wanted to get Damon Lindelof, obviously, right, on your show for an interview? And has that changed for you now in terms of would you want to interview him about Lost?
I'd say maybe he will now say no to an interview about Lost. But
that's true. Yeah.
But we were always, in fact, because I met him during The Leftovers, and I kind of mentioned the podcast, and he was like, oh my God, get us on, get me on for the finale, whatever. He seemed very, especially because I told him I loved the ending. he was like, you. And then Jack, on the flip side, also interviewed him, I can't remember what for now, and mentioned the podcast, and he seemed to remember, and he was like, get me on. Look, we'll try. but we would ask him,
of course,
about this, because how can you not? And I think he'd expect it. And I think the way that he appears to be reckoning with it, he would embrace the opportunity to further kind of distance himself from those comments without denying them.
Yeah, agreed.
Because I think that's the key. The key, isn't it? He didn't deny it. He kind of said, whereas Carlton kind of denied it.
Yeah, Carlton, I feel like there's even less chance of getting anything in terms of responses to that, right, from him, Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just not really worth trying, is it?
No. There you go.
So, but yeah, hopefully a Damon interview will happen.
Okay, maybe. Which would be amazing, right? Which would be amazing, Yeah, a lot of stuff to ask him about for sure. Yeah,
that's for sure.
Well, I just want to wrap up then. Going back to something a bit more positive, let's talk about the legacy of Lost. Its influence on television and everything that's come since. Do you find, Jacob, when you're reviewing and covering new television shows, do you see that kind of Lost influence in other shows?
So much. And it's funny because, like, I do like a TV review thing with my colleague Annabelle, and we have to watch a lot of TV because of that, but you don't have time to watch everything, or when I say everything, you don't have time to watch all of the show. It's like 5 or 10 episodes or whatever. But I think you get a good sense by then whether a show is good, and as I said to you before, there are lots of things where I'm like, this isn't hitting the mark. What I think Lost did in terms of its legacy and how other shows have been affected is that I think it showed how you can do mystery without skimping on character, and vice versa. They coexisted in this perfect little meld of creativity. And I think there are shows out there now that obviously get labeled Lost Light, whether they deserve it or not. Like, and when I say deserve it or not, I mean don't deserve it in terms of quality, but sometimes I'm like there's a plane crash in Yellow Jackets and people go, oh, it's like Lost, and I know there's flashbacks and stuff, but I still think it's a very distinct show. Like, it's Losty, but it's not, it doesn't feel like Lost to me.
Yeah. And by the way, I kind of feel like Yellow Jackets has already dropped the ball in its second season more than Lost ever did,
right?
Which is a shame.
And I kind of had a feeling it would, watching season 1, because it just didn't feel like it had it just doesn't feel like it loves the characters as much as Lost loved its characters. And It was more interested in kind of presenting, there were kind of conduits for twists that didn't really make sense 3 episodes on. Whereas in Lost, the twists always meant something. They were always there for a reason, and they would always get explored, and they always had, they could never, like, they weren't like pull a thread and it just disintegrates like Yellow Jack.
Yeah.
So my ultimately my thing is, I think Lost showed you what mystery box television could be, but also did it with best ensemble of characters I can really, really think that has ever existed. Yeah.
I think that's why it works so well. I completely agree with you. It's that high concept matched with actual characters that you care about, and that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And finally, I want you to rank the seasons, Jacob. How would you rank seasons 1 to 6?
Oh man, you're joking me. Oh wow.
Come on, you must have thought about this. You must.
So I think season 6 is at the bottom, and then I reckon is probably season. This sounds insane because I love it so much, but probably season 1. Yeah. Then 2 for me, which I know we're probably going to differ here because I reckon you'd probably put 3 next. Season 2. Then I'm going to say season 5. Then 3. Then 4.
Nice. So 4 is your top.
I think 4 is
it's amazing.
It's a banger season.
It is a banger season. Absolutely is.
It's so good. And 3, if it didn't just have the wobbly moments, would probably be up there because I think 3 has the longest stretch of best episodes.
Interesting. That's good. Well, I'm going, and I haven't revisited it in a while, to be fair, but I would go in my head 6 lowest. Then I would actually say 3 for me, only because it does have such good stuff. But I will always remember how bored I was during the whole Hydra Island cage stuff at the beginning of season 3. So I'd go 6, then 3, then 2, then 1, then 4, then 5. I think 4 and 5 are still my top, I think. But
so true. I mean, I feel really harsh on 1, putting it so low, but it's because the ratio of episodes that I love in the other seasons are just higher.
Totally.
Whereas season 1, my ultimate favourite episode is actually a season 1 episode, which is episode 19, Deus Ex Machina, the one where Locke's banging on the hatch door and then the light comes on.
Oh, amazing.
Just incredible.
Incredible stuff.
So yeah,
love it. Well, there you go. Well, Jacob, thank you so much. We managed to rattle through a lot there, but thank you so much for we've overrun a lot more than I thought. But there's a lot of ground to cover. It turns out
there is, and this is literally I could spend my whole days doing this with you, Mike. Really, I could. Thank you for inviting me on. It's an honour.
I've absolutely loved it, and just remind people where they can find you, and if they do want to come and hear more of Jacob discussing Lost episode by episode, where can they find it?
So I'm Jacob_Stoll on Twitter, and I write for The Independent. I'm chief culture reporter, so you can read me there, and I often do try and write about Lost whenever I can. But Lost Boys Pods is our Twitter, and Lost Boys Pod on Apple, on SoundCloud, on Spotify, and we are, as I said, we did take a break for quite a while, but we are stashing the episodes up, and we are not going to disappoint once we start releasing them very soon.
I cannot wait. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mike.
And that's it for our bonus 2-part episode of Lost. Thank you so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to my brilliant guest, Jacob Stolworthy. Well, I loved getting the chance to look back at Lost, especially this week for its 20th anniversary. Please do send in your thoughts and memories of Lost, any theories, any questions you have about the show. Drop me a line, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. We will be back. Normal service will resume next week as we return to the second half of our Nature Bites Back season, and I'm going to be joined by Michael Blythe to discuss Cujo and Alligator, 2 brilliant animal attack movies from Lewis Teague from the early 80s. So there is so much good stuff to come. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.